A Fox 61 exclusive this morning. Long before the pandemic hit, our country and our state was dealing with another killer, addiction.
Now, Fox 61's Margot Farrell joins us now in the studio with an up-close and personal look at one man's story. Good morning.
Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Ashley, and to everybody at home. Yeah, it could not get much worse for a man named Pedro Robles. I had the chance to speak with him exclusively and to look at his constant struggle to try to stay clean and how the pandemic has made it nearly impossible.
I've used marijuana, speed, hashish, cocaine, heroin, crack.
Pedro Robles started smoking marijuana as a teenager, and once he hit 20 years old, he was a full-blown addict.
It opened the door to other stuff, and the other stuff just took a hold of me, and it hasn't let me go yet. And now I'm 61 and still struggling.
Robles' addiction led to problems with family, friends, law enforcement, job loss, evictions, and then in 2020, it got worse.
I was weaning off. I went to a treatment. Things were getting better, and because of the pandemic, I shut down.
Robles was evicted because of his drug use, and after finding a new apartment, he and his girlfriend's drug abuse led to them losing custody of their daughter, who now lives with Robles' niece.
But it makes me feel terrible because I can't do much for her.
But Robles has been getting help through the community renewal team in Hartford.
The door's always open, and they keep me afloat because they're constantly checking up on me and making sure everything's all right.
Yet Robles continues to use, knowing his next high could be his last.
Have you used today?
Yes, heroin.
Robles isn't alone. 2020 could end up being one of the deadliest years on record because of the pandemic.
I really don't want to say it. However, the government gave everybody $1,200, and that was a boost for a lot of people.
The AP reports in 2019, the U.S. saw a record high 71,000 overdose deaths. In Connecticut, preliminary overdose deaths also went up 19% through the end of July compared to the same time period last year. For Casey DeRozier, who works with addicts in CRT's intensive outpatient program and has known Robles for years, she fears it will only get worse.
The addiction's telling you to distance yourself from people. They don't care about you. And COVID's telling you to distance yourself from people.
That physical, in-person, sober connection is what DeRozier and so many other addiction experts say is crucial for recovery.
So what happens? They end up using and potentially overdosing and dying, and nobody finds them.
Being locked up in a house, limited to what you can do, there's a void.
Data shows that in every state that the AP researched, overdose deaths reached their highest numbers in April or May. The AP also cited ODMAP and found 62% of those counties say they saw increases once those lockdowns started. Robles says he is trying. He wants a better life for himself, his girlfriend, and his daughter. And when he hopefully reaches sobriety, he said there's so much he wants to do.
When I see that, I see myself go bowling if I can. I like go-kart riding, sliding down a hill with snow on a sled if I can. You know, that's what I see. Sitting in a restaurant and having a good dinner as opposed to sitting in the bathroom or in the kitchen table spending $40, $50 on garbage.
DeRozier believes with the right support and treatment, Robles has a chance to be that person he wants to be.
He never gave up. He came to every meeting. He made a way to get to the meeting. He would have to ride his bicycle across town.
But now those meetings are virtual, which works for some, but not everyone. And for frontline workers, addiction is a health crisis on top of the pandemic. But hope is the key.
Every bad day that you have had, your survival rate is at 100%. So I always tell my clients, is your heart still beating? That means you have a purpose.
For Robles, he says he just wants relief.
We're not bad people. We just struggle with an infection or disease that is uncontrollable at times.
Hearts and thanks go out to Pedro, of course, wishing him the best in his efforts to become sober once again. And of course, Casey for all the hard work that she does and the folks at CRT or anybody really who deals with folks in the addiction community. You heard that story there that the community renewal team does offer programs for those who suffer from substance abuse disorder. The one Pedro was doing was the intensive outpatient program. So there are different qualifications for the different programs, but the one constant is that the addict does have to give a clean urine sample in order to get those medications that are supposed to help wean people off of the drugs. But Tim Ashley, that is obviously a lot harder to do right now given the circumstances that we're all in.
Yeah, you mentioned before, it sort of works for some people and not for others. I mean, that's got to be very frustrating that there's not one tried and true way that's going to work for everybody. You know?
And for sure, we know that the path of addiction really with people, it changes no matter who you are. Addiction isn't prejudice. Addiction doesn't determine how it's going to impact your life. And what I found throughout COVID-19 and during the pandemic and researching this topic is that at the beginning of the pandemic, I spoke with someone who was in long-term recovery in AA and NA meetings. And they had said that they were seeing more people than ever who were logging on to those meetings. So for somebody who is further along in their sobriety, or who may be a little bit more stable, the virtual meetings was great because they were just at home and able to access them. But for the people who were new to sobriety or who hadn't quite made that shift yet, going virtual was exactly the opposite of everything they're taught to do. They're taught to be around sober people. They're taught to have that connection. And when you break that, it's hard for them. It's easy to hide things from behind virtual screens. It's, you know, you don't get, like Casey said to me, she goes, I don't know who you're kidding if you're coming through that door and don't think we're giving you a hug. She's like, a cup of coffee, a hug, like they want you to feel loved and together and supported. So it's much, much harder right now for the people who are new on this journey.
Yeah, that human touch element missing there. Has Pedro ever been able to reach any point of sobriety during his path there?
So he has. And what's remarkable at some extent is that he's 41 years old. So you think about that, he's 61 years old. He's been an addict, for 41 years. So this is decades and decades of abuse. He has had some bouts with sobriety. Actually, most recently, Casey told me that he did go about a year and a half without using. So that was good. But again, as we know, and I can speak from personal history here, that my family has battled addiction. Different family members of mine, is that, you know, sometimes you're on the wagon and sometimes you hop off. So it's definitely been an up and down situation. And, you know, there's different factors. One thing I didn't include in that piece, and I don't mean to cut you off real quick, is that if you remember that fire we talked about a few months back, the one with the hand sanitizer situation that lit up an apartment complex in Hartford, left one person dead, a lot of people injured. Pedro, his girlfriend, and the baby were in that apartment building.
Really?
So when I talked about the evictions and the things he's been through. I mean, imagine starting off the pandemic, he was on the 4th floor, he came down, it was completely engulfed. I mean, you imagine a panic situation and then having to find another place to live. And it was just so overwhelming when I spoke to him to think, it puts things in perspective, really.
Wow. I do want to ask you one more question about the counselors. You mentioned how hard it is for people trying to work through their recovery to do it virtually. On the other end, the counselors themselves, have they found that it's harder to try to do their jobs? Or, you know, I know they can't keep tabs on the other people, but at least you still have some line of communication there.
Absolutely. And that is why my heart just really goes out to these counselors, is because they are so invested in everybody they work with. I mean, you could see it there in Casey's voice and her smile. She loves these clients. She told me herself that she has sent the police to do welfare checks on Pedro if she doesn't hear from him. And what's so hard for her is that she does miss that in-person connection. She loves to see the clients who come in and to be able to watch them grow and hopefully reach sobriety. So it's taken a big toll. She told me that she will never, ever forget working during the pandemic. And as we know that this is an essential service, she has been working throughout the entirety of the pandemic and actually did come down with COVID at one point. Now she's okay, she's doing better now, but it just goes to show you that these type of people are willing to put everything on the line and to give back to those in need, because as we've been saying all morning long, substance abuse disorder is just that. It is a disorder that impacts people, and it will impact people so differently. So this is a time where we are all being told to stay distant, to stay apart. But I encourage you and I urge you to try and just check on your neighbors, check on your family, check on your friends. Do so as safely as possible, because you just really don't know what's happening behind closed doors now more than ever. So if you'd like more information about CRT, what they do, and you'd like just to learn a little bit more about the topic, head to fox61.com. In the studio this morning, I'm Margot Farrell, Fox 61 News.